We continue the Shir in Sicha Saran. Rabbi Nachman saying Sif Kuf Ayin, paragraph 170. Rosenfeld says, relates that he once asked Rabbi Nachman a curious question. Admittedly, naturally, nobody had more emunah than Rabbi Nachman. Nobody was a more loyal Talmud, a greater degree of emunah tzadikim than Rabbi Nachman. Rosenfeld said, naturally, unquestionably, Rabbi Nachman is the tzadik emes who reached the height of kedusha, a level and degree of soul, neshama, and heavenliness, and greatness that was unparalleled in history. The question is, though, what does it take to become so great? There are others, not today, of course, but those days, Shemai Kodesh's Talmidim, who lived at that time, who devoted their entire lives means every single moment of their lives, day and night, every waking moment, but even in some degree, and the way they slept, the way they ate, everything was pure, heavenly, and holy. In that case, then, how come that they did not reach the same level? What more could they have done? What else is possible? As an example, R Nosson himself states that before he met Rabbi Nachman, he himself was already a great tzadik on his own. He was a Talmud Muvhak of Rabbi Arizal. He was taken as a son-in-law by one of the greatest tzaddikim at that time. Rosenfeld said about his father-in-law, he was so great at tzaddik, so perfect, because he never slept lying down. He'd always sleep in a sitting position. He refused to lie down because that's relaxing physically. You're supposed to devote your time purely to the neshama. He would never wash during the week because of the shyness of chumness of how to wash. A lot of halachas in the Shulchan Aruch. He wouldn't wash to eat. He would deprive himself of a regular meal. He did other things that were inconceivable. The human mind can hardly conceive of such greatness. He would sit constantly, and if he would doze off, he'd keep his fingers on a lit candle. So when the candle would burn down his fingers, he'd wake up again. There wasn't a moment of his lifetime that wasn't spent purely on the study of Torah, Tefillah, and as a Gaon, he was considered one of the, if not the greatest Gaon at that time. Rosenfeld at that time marveled. He studied his father-in-law well. He asked the question at that time, saying, what could Moshe Rabbeinu have had greater than what his father-in-law had? What difference could there have been? What can any human being do more to serve Hashem than his father-in-law? This was the type of question that Rosenfeld asked Rabbi Nachman now, only a little differently. Because Rosenfeld stated that this question about his father-in-law bothered him for a long time. In what way was Moshe Rabbeinu greater than his father-in-law? What was the difference? Until he met Rabbi Nachman. Then he saw a difference. And a term that he used to compare both would give an insight, a little. We are not big enough to understand, but at least a slight insight we could get from there. A person who's very hungry, for whom there's a certain delicacy that would satisfy him as a luxury part of a meal, a knish. A knish is something that is like a luxury. Knish is delicious to most people. At least the one who appreciates it, certainly it is a delicacy. Rosenfeld said comparing, difficult term to use, but he did use that. His own words. Comparing his father-in-law, the great tzaddik son of Recha, to Rabbi Nachman. He said, both are like a knish. But there's a difference. His father-in-law was like a cold knish. Rabbi Nachman was like a warm, a hot, fresh knish. Now, you got to try to understand deeply the meaning. Both were great, that means both were tremendous. To an ordinary layman, they both reached the peak of Kiddush. Yet one had a freshness, a depth, a warmth that was not found in the other. This way, he now understood why his father-in-law was not like Moshe Rabbeinu. Noson's question to the Arizal now was different. He said, I know that you're different. Of course. Naturally, I believe it, I understand it perfectly. But I'd like to know why. Why didn't others achieve the same height? For instance, his father-in-law. Why couldn't his father-in-law have been a warm Knish? What was missing? What more could he have done? A very perplexing question. Can you give a simple answer to that question? Rabbi Nachman said, very simply. The answer is so simple that the smallest mind could grasp this. The answer is that to achieve a height, a person has to struggle, to work, every second to work at it. Like sitting down to learn a page, a daf Gemara, one person could read the Gemara, just read it, glance at it, translate it, and that's it. Another person would work harder to understand deeper. The third person would struggle on the Gemara, struggle to understand very deeply with Teshuva and with Mefarshim, with commentaries, to delve so deeply that it is a mental battle to maintain the level of understanding, the continuity of Gemara, understanding it in depth. This means a definite difficulty on the part of the person, difficulty in working mentally. So too, a person could serve Hashem, which is spiritual, and yet do it with physical labor. When he davens, he pours forth his heart. He screams. He gives forth of his might. Every ounce of strength goes into tefillah. Another person uses his strength for lifting weights, for digging ditches. He gives all of his strength, his whole insides, from the very depth. It comes out a cry to Hashem in tefillah. And anything he does as a mitzvah, he puts his life, his soul into it. So this means then that there is hard labor in serving Hashem. Now, the harder a person labors at it, the more he achieves. Therefore, the answer is simple. Those tzaddikim, those great tzaddikim, who did not achieve this great height, is simply because they did not work that hard. They worked very hard, but not that hard. There's a difference in the amount of work, struggle, labor put into it. It's all according to the amount of person's deeds, work, and struggle. That's how he achieves. And of course, no two people are alike. Therefore, one puts in more work, he gets to a higher degree, a higher level. Which of course means too, the Menachem said that those who are not perfect, it's because they themselves could have done better. It's not that they're missing something, not they were not given the opportunity, they don't have the soul that can achieve this height. They themselves did not work hard enough. They worked very hard. They became great tzaddikim, comparable to the rabbis of the Gemara even. They could have been greater had they worked still harder. Menachem said once, speaking about his own accomplishments, he said that the chiddush about himself is the fact that he broke all the taivas, different types of taivas, desires for physical pleasures, the major three taivas, of course, are taivas niyuf, the worst of all the taivas, illicit relations of any kind, and the taivas mamon, the desire for money, the craving for money, taivas achila, the craving for food, eating. To break it doesn't mean that you break the craving, but you still eat, or you still have money. This means to really destroy these taivas that within a person there is no longer a desire for any of these three. Every tzadik does that. Arizal said he was a chiddush because other great tzaddikim who work all their lifetime to break these taivas, they finally reach that level of breaking the taivas at old age. It takes them many years, decades to achieve it. Arizal was a chiddush that before he reached the age of 20, he had already completely broken, eradicated these three major taivas, as well as other types of taivas too. Of course, there's also the taiva for kavod, gaiva, kas, and so forth. These midas, all those are broken. The major taivas under the age of 20. Arizal said that, for instance, food itself was something he disliked. He ate because he was forced to sustain himself, to keep his life going. But he had no desire left whatsoever for food. And as far as the other taiva, Tikuney Zohar, that he was a complete chiddush, greatest chiddush in the world, because that, we know, that Tikuney Zohar is Said Tzadik. The word Tzadik applies to one who has Tikuney Zohar, and the greater the Tikuney Zohar, the greater the degree of tzadik. Since the Arizal was the tzadik, the holiest tzadik in existence, naturally his degree of Tikuney Zohar was unmatched. There was one time that Arizal had a talus, which he had used for a long time. It was an old talus, and the time came to buy a new one. Arizal got a new talus. Getting a new one was no problem. The point was that the talus he had for so many years was difficult to part with. What does one do with such a talus? Ordinarily, if you have an old talus, you put it into shemus. Nobody's going to take an old talus. It's understood. Who wants an old talus? You want a new one. Arizal's old talus, which Arizal had used for so many years, in which he had davened so many tefillos, naturally it was desired by everyone. It is a known fact. Arizal brings, other specific Kabbalah bring that putting on a beged of a tzadik, depending on which beged it is, a person can receive a ha'orah, a bit of a light of the midas, the characteristics of that tzaddik. Speaking, of course, only of tzaddikim mitim. So especially the talus, which is so holy, Arizal decided to give it to one of his very close talmidim. It's not mentioned which one, but it was a very choshev, very important Talmud. Arizal said to this Talmud, although of course the Talmud treasured it, and he said to the Talmud, I want you to be very careful with this talus. Very careful, because you know how many threads there are in a talus? As many threads as you count in this talus, that's how many tears I poured out, crying before Hashem, till I understood what the meaning of the word talus is. So I understood what the mitzvah of talus is, meaning in depth, the deeper meaning, understanding of what the mitzvah of talus is, and therefore, since this talus is the symbol of all those tefillos, be careful to treasure it. Now, of course that talus is not around now, but we brought once a picture that does exist today of Arizal's yarmulke, the actual yarmulke that Arizal wore, the white yarmulke with gold braid around it. And of course this too has the chashivus of a davar shebekdusha, the crown. Everything touched, held, especially used by tzaddik emes, is priceless. We see this from the words of Rabbi Arizal when he said to the Talmud, be very careful to treasure this talus. We should be zecher at least to recognize these facts, at least if we cannot have the talus or the other items, just to have in thought, in mind, the emunah about the greatness of the tzadikim, that everything belongs to the tzadikim, is part of him, and has the kedusha that is infinite. Moshe tells that one time some incident occurred where Rabbi Arizal's closest Mishamesh Bakodesh. Again, we don't have to go through this too many times too often. That Moshe was Rabbi Arizal's closest Talmud, the most important one, the one about whom Rabbi Arizal said he is the one that carried on the lessons, the light of Rabbi Arizal for generations afterwards. Not for that Nosson, Rabbi Arizal's name would have been forgotten by now. There would have been no trace of his writings. Just as the Riyah Kodesh's writings were perpetuated through the work, the writings of Chaim Vitalzal. So it's understood that Moshe was the closest Talmud. But there was one Talmud who was called a Mishamesh Bakodesh, who served Rabbi Arizal physically. It's the closest one to actually serve him, Shimush. And this was Rabbi Shimon Zal. Although he was much older than Rabbi Arizal, still was zecher to recognize the greatness of Rabbi Arizal and who offered his services, come close to him forever. We'll have a story later on about how Rabbi Shimon Zal was zecher to get a promise from Rabbi Arizal that he would be his Mishamesh Bakodesh in Gan Eden. However, one time, an incident occurred. Rabbi Arizal said to Rabbi Shimon Zal, Shimon Zal, by the way, his tziyah and his kever is directly below the kever of the Arizal. Those who were in Tzfas, the Arizal's kever, know that the kever of Shimon Zal is directly beneath the Arizal's kever. One time something happened where Rabbi Arizal said to Rabbi Shimon Zal, I'm going to have to send you into exile, to Golos, the other side of the sea, the River Don. Rabbi Arizal's words came out, they must come true. And so it happened that Rabbi Shimon Zal was forced from heaven to travel to this remote section of a country that was so far that there practically were no Jews at all in that section. He was exiled there for whatever cause, stayed there for a period of 3 years' time. And the adventures that occurred during those 3 years are too numerous to tell, especially the nisyonos, the difficulties and tests that transpired because of the fact that he lived among Goyim. Live among Goyim for 3 years' time without a trace of any contact with Jews. Imagine the difficulty. It's like being in a prison, in a dungeon with evil criminals. Those 3 years' time, Rabbi Shimon Zal passed these tests. Eventually, he returned. He came back when Rabbi Arizal was now living in the city of Breslov. He came back. We can imagine the joy at the reunion, not seeing Rabbi Arizal for 3 years' time. Rabbi Arizal said to Rabbi Shimon Zal, you recall what I was like when you left me. What was Rabbi Arizal like? Let's mention once more the fact that Rabbi Arizal made the trip successfully to Eretz Yisrael, and because of this trip, Rabbi Arizal said he was ashamed of everything he knew before getting to Eretz Yisrael. That's how much he achieved by going to Eretz Yisrael. He was ashamed of what? What he was before Eretz Yisrael was simply the greatest tzadik alive in the world at that time. Greatest tzadik at that time, and possibly many generations back. Many generations back. We cannot go into comparisons, but let's say, as is written, that he even surpassed the degree of the Baal Shem HaKodesh before he got to Eretz Yisrael. then getting to Eretz Yisrael, Arizal had gotten to a point that he was ashamed of his level before Eretz Yisrael. That's how much higher he had attained. And after that, he kept on going higher constantly. This was years after being in Eretz Yisrael, when he sent Rabbi Shimon Zal into exile. Rabbi Shimon Zal came back. Menachem said, "When you saw me last 3 years ago, and now you see me again now, in these 3 years, I have accomplished as much as I accomplished in my whole lifetime until you saw me 3 years ago. I've risen that much more. I've doubled the height that I was then. Today now is twice as high as before. In these 3 years, I did what took me all those years to accomplish." Now this, of course, is incredible if you think of the level of Arizal was at that time. However, a short time later, sometime later, Arizal said to Rabbi Shimon Zal, "I do not stand on one level ever for any period of time. As long as I'm alive, I keep on climbing. I keep on ascending to a higher and higher level. I told you before that in 3 years' time I accomplished all that I had accomplished in my past lifetime. I've gotten to a point now," and I said, "we're now, in one single day, I accomplished everything I have had till today. Until this day, whatever I had, in one day I accomplished equal to that, twice as great as yesterday. And the day after, again, each day I double the amount that I've had till now." So it's not that each day the same amount is had. Each day there is a double amount. This keeps on doubling, and we can imagine how infinitely this goes to. Sometime later, Rabbi Nachman said, "I told you before that I accomplished each day the equivalent of what I accomplished in my life till this day. I've gotten to a point where I can do this each hour." And again later, Rabbi Nachman said, "I now do it in one moment. Every second of my life, I keep on doubling my past greatness." Now this is something that is impossible for our minds to conceive. We cannot understand such greatness. It's impossible. However, Rabbi Nachman once said very simply, Hashem is infinite. So if I keep on going quickly, I rise to the highest levels imaginable, there is still that much more. There's no end. No matter how high one goes, but when I get closer to Hashem, this is constant. So in ratio, of course, rising to Hashem, it's understood that there is no end to how high a person can go. But at the same time, above those beneath him, imagine to what height Rabbi Nachman rose. And therefore, again, in one word, if ever there is the slightest skepticism on anybody's part, we have one single statement to prove it. The Arizal, the Ariyat Kodesh, the Holy Lion, right at the Kisvi Arizal, who was so great, he is called the father or master of Kabbalah, once wrote that, according to his knowledge, his conception, the greatest height that a person can reach is a certain level in Keser, one of the highest degrees of the Sfiras. This height will be reached only when Mashiach comes. Mashiach will reach that height. This level that Arizal states is something that the Arizal said, I've gotten to a level many steps higher than this a long time ago. I'm still going up. That itself is definite, conclusive proof. Because at least even the worst skeptic and the worst misnagid will never accuse any tzadik of outright chas v'shalom stating something that is not true. No other tzadik ever made this statement. The only one that makes it is the one that states it truthfully. So this gives us an insight a little to how fortunate we are that we are among the few, we hope, that have the Emunah Shlema, and to retain that Emunah in Rabbeinu Zal and Skashus to Rabbeinu Zal. Rabbeinu Zal said too that if this sounds very difficult and unusual, let it be known that every person could do something similar to this. There is a person who spends the whole lifetime in doing mitzvahs, performing mitzvahs. He works hard, he puts on tefillin every day, he davens, he learns, he gives stucca. Along comes someone and he performs an incredible act, a 15 minutes, unusual act. Self-sacrifice. He goes out and does something which others wouldn't dare to do, an act of courage. And these 15 minutes, he gets the same credit as somebody who worked for 70 years in serving Hashem, doing regular mitzvahs. But that person would never have dared to do what this person did. Say he threw himself into the fire to save the life of a Jew. Or he performed an act of courage and sacrificing himself, his wealth, to get something special done. For example, it's stories of places where there was no mikveh in a town, and one person gave up his whole business, his wealth, to be able to build, to erect, or to purchase the necessities for a mikveh. This one single person was instrumental in having a mikveh for the whole city. Mitzvahs of that sort, and that one single act could be, at times, as great as another person's whole lifetime of acts. All the different stories we had in the Gemara, where Bocha Rebbe, Abena Kodesh, cried and said, Yesh Kanei Lomei V'Shah Achas, it's a person who can receive Gan Eden for one single action. Even a goy who jumped into the fire with Minimum, compared to another person who 70 years of his lifetime has to work in order to get Gan Eden. This Arizal pointed out that it's possible. The person has to watch for that opportunity. You never know what can do it. Now, we have, for example, a very simple case. A person could spend a lifetime, or he could spend many lifetimes, come back again and again, and never accomplish what one person does by just getting to the Bein Azal Siyan. So there are cases that are especially outstanding, or, again, as Rabbi Nachman Lezer once said, of course, this is a clear-cut statement. There are people who are very rich, who give a lot of tzedakah in their lifetime, millionaires who give $100,000 at a time to these federations and different charities, appeals, federations. They'll give a check for $150,000 or for $1 million. And another person will dedicate his tzedakah to the Bein Azals. This Moshe, the Bein Azal tzedakah, that person could have given millions of dollars to tzedakah. It's not worth as much as this poor man who gave just a few dollars, his little meiser from his meager salary. A person can buy, can achieve Gan Eden with tzedakah, with a little tzedakah, much more than a millionaire could with his mountains of wealth. Bein Azal once said, he said this, again, will have a slight insight into Bein Azal's greatness. This was said by the Bein Azal before he got to Eretz Yisrael. Alright? Bein Azal said, I do not know how there are tzadikim who perform a pidyon. Pidyon means that someone needs to redeem himself. It's like we have kaparas that in Yom Kippur you give 18 cents for life in order to save a person's life who's sick or who might be doomed by the heavenly court, Chas v'Shalom, for Yom Kippur. We have these kaparas. We say, let this be a pidyon nefesh, to redeem ourselves, to save our lives by this pidyon. Now, pidyon means it's like ransom. A person is in captivity. He might be sentenced to death. Chas v'Shalom. He is ransomed by this pidyon. The way to do a pidyon generally is to bring a sum of money to a tzadik, to go to a tzadik who knows how to perform this, The tzaddik says the necessary tefillah with this pidyon, and he saves the person's life. Rabbi Nachman said, of course nowadays we don't have that, but in those days there were great tzaddikim who would accept pidyons. Today there might be some too, a couple who do it, but we'd rather deal with straight. Those days the word tzaddikim who took these pidyonos, the pidyon, Rabbi Nachman said, I don't know how these tzaddikim perform this act of pidyon, because in order to redeem the person's life, a person, the tzaddik who does it, has to give this pidyon, this tzedakah, this ransom, this tefillah and pidyon has to reach the heavenly court where this person was sentenced to die. He's got to give this ransom for this person's life. Now, fine, if a tzaddik is that great, he can go up to heaven, go into the heavenly court, give this pidyon as ransom, good. I agree, there are many who could do that. But there's one point, though. There are chaf daled but they didn't in heaven. There are 24 but they didn't. Not one, but 24 heavenly courts. These 24 heavenly courts are ones where you could have a person has been tried and sentenced in one heavenly court, and it's the only one that keeps this person's record. So if a tzaddik knows how to get to a heavenly court, one, he's that great he can reach one heavenly court in heaven, he has the odds of 23 against 1. He might have hit the wrong one. So what good is that tzaddik getting to the heavenly court if he might get to the wrong one, or he wouldn't know, if he knows a few, he wouldn't know which one to go to. So how do these tzaddikim accept the pidyon? In order to accept the pidyon and to successfully complete this pidyon, you must have a tzaddik who knows every one of the 24 heavenly courts, who knows how to approach, how to enter into these heavenly courts. Each one requires a different approach. And also to know what kind of a pidyon to bring for each one of these courts. Rabbi Nachman said, now, there's only one person in a generation who knows all 24 courts. And very humbly speaking, Rabbi Nachman said, I am one who knows. If I know all 24, it means that it's guaranteed there is nobody else in the world, because there is no time when you have more than one tzaddik who's given this knowledge. So Rabbi Nachman was the only one who knew the 24 heavenly courts. This was before going to Eretz Yisrael. He was ashamed of this madrega later on. He was the only one who knew these 24 heavenly courts. Rabbi Nachman said, how do I do it? I know that the question is, you have a person who is doomed. I go to this court. I know which one to go to. I come there, and they refuse to change the sentence. They refuse to change the decision. I am given a right to appeal this decision in another court. There are different levels in heaven too. So I send my appeal to a higher court, appeal for this person's life. It's like sending a note to another court. The appeal is studied, and it is either accepted or rejected. If it's rejected, I go to the next court. I get an appeal. This way, as long as the decision, as long as the sentence is being delayed, postponed, becomes weaker. The Gemara says, Bos dina, batal dina. As long as the sentence is not carried out, it becomes very weak. It's easy to break down. So in taking up the time of the heavenly courts, going from one to the next constantly, the decision becomes so weak it's easy already to remove that decision, to change it, to alter it. Now if I should go to all the 24 courts, and I am not successful in being able to negate this decision, if I cannot nullify it by my appeals in all 24 courts, I also have the power of sending a direct appeal before the king himself. Kaviyachol before Hashem, who is the supreme leader of these 24 courts. And that's not simple. Any person could say, well, I can do that too. I can daven to Hashem. Daven to Hashem is one thing, but to be able to have the power to be considered one who can enter into the throne of Hashem, and there to be heard, to be listened to, be taken as an official whose appeal counts before Hashem. This, of course, takes one who is able to first go through the minor courts. It's not simple, because you speak to a king, you have to know how to address the king, how to conduct yourself giving the proper respect and honor, and how to present the case with clarity. Zohar Kodesh says, for example, you speak to Hashem, Hashem understands all. Hashem knows all. Why do you have to daven? Why not just say, Hashem, you know what I want? Finished. Yet there is a rule: you must daven before Hashem. You must say things very clearly. When we daven for a person, we mention the person's name and the person's mother's name, not the father. Because a tefillah must be very exact, otherwise it could be rejected. Though Hashem knows the machshavas, the thoughts, the mind of a person, yet it must be very clear. So it's not simple for one to come before Hashem and to present the case with clarity. This, the Ben said, too, I can perform. And then, in addition to this, the tzadik who does this must also know the secret of the So'ir HaMishtalech. On Yom Kippur, when the Kohen Gadol goes to the Holy of Holies, also coming before Hashem, with, as an emissary of the entire Jewish people, with the request of all the Jews to be forgiven, to seal them all in the book of life, he first performs the act of the So'ir HaMishtalech. He takes 2 goats. One goat is sent to the edge of a mountain, and there it's thrown off the mountain. The goat is destroyed. The other goat is offered as a sacrifice to Hashem. Why these 2 goats? The entire rule about one is the goat that goes la'azozel. It is sort of a gift pacifying the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, the Satan, and then one to Hashem. Who has to pacify the angel of death? The Satan, the same angel, if on Yom Kippur he has no power. The word HaSatan is Begematria 364. The Gemara says Satan is 364 because the Satan has power 364 days of the year, not on Yom Kippur. So why do you have to pacify the Satan? The answer is, the Gemara says, Zohar Kodesh brings many instances, we've discussed them at length many times previously, that this is a right, a privilege given to the Satan. He can rise up and be mekatlik. He can work as an attorney against a Jew, no matter how weak his case is. He can build up a case unless somehow he is pacified. And therefore, Yom Kippur, no matter how weak he is, still, the time when the lives of all the Jews are in jeopardy, we must throw him a bone. So we show him that we are giving a goat for a sacrifice to Hashem. First, we give one to you to close your mouth, not to speak against the Jews. This is how one can then bring a korban to Hashem with immunity. This secret the tzaddik emes has to know, bringing a pidyon. It's not how to go about pacifying the Satan first. He should not work against his appeal. This was also necessary, knowing how to take care of a pidyon. All this Arizal knew perfectly before getting to Eretz Yisrael. One more statement. So Moshe says he would rather not speak about the Arizal's life before Eretz Yisrael, yet certain things must come out. One about the Botei Dinim, the heavenly courts, which of course, number 24 is brought that the Din, this Din is called Elikim, is called Dayan. Elikim, there are Kuf Chaf Tziruf Elikim. 120 combinations for the word Elikim, because when there are 5 letters, a 5-letter word has 120 different combinations, which means that every letter has 24 combinations, makes it 24. Word Elikim, each one of the letters is 24. This is the Chaf Dalaboti Din. Arizal said there's one more item that Arizal stated before getting to Yisrael, again to show what he had achieved at that time. Arizal said, when I have to go to bed, I have to go to sleep, the little time that Arizal slept, I find I have difficulty in sleeping. Sleep means that you've got to lose consciousness, go off into dreamland. I find it difficult to go to sleep because as I lay down to sleep, before falling asleep, I see that all the 600,000 letters of the Torah come and stand before me. With those letters standing in front of me, 600,000 letters, it's difficult to fall asleep because you concentrate on counting these letters or seeing these letters, what each one stands for. Each letter, of course, represents what is obviously meant is each letter represents a Jew. There are 600,000 Jews. The word Yisrael, Am Yisrael, the Jewish people, Jewish nation, Yisrael, is the Yoshetevis of Yesh Shishin Riboy Esias LaTorah. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah. Each Jew basically has a letter in the Torah. Though there are more than 600,000 Jews, basically there are 600,000 neshamas. With this we can attempt to answer a question that has bothered, that has tormented the Mefarshim for many centuries. And of course many have attempted to give the answer to it in different forms. And the answer, the final answer is, of course, emunah. We just have to believe. Period. When the Zohar Kodesh and the Arizal and all the Sforim say there are 600,000 letters in the Torah, meaning the Chumash, the 5 Chumashim, 600,000 letters, if we count the Torah, count the letters, anyone will find that there are exactly 304,805 letters, which is just about half of 600,000. Why do we find so often that the number is 600,000? There are many attempts given to answer this question, many times shown that the Biluyim and so forth, which do not work out exactly. We must say that there is some kind of a combination which works out to 600,000, as is written in the Fedish, Zohar Kodesh and Sforim Ekdeshim. But still it is accepted by all. Absolute fact. There are 600,000 letters in the Torah corresponding to the 600,000 neshamas. Now here we can see that Arizal said the Fedish. The Fedish, they were speaking about numbers. He saw 600,000 letters in front of his eyes, which means that he testified to the fact there are 600,000 letters. We see, with our short-sightedness, we can only see 304,805. Arizal was able to see more deeply into the Torah, could see all 600,000 letters. And why? Because the tzadik emes is kailel, encompasses all the 600,000 basic neshamas of the Jewish people. Therefore, the Arizal could, since he was the tzadik emes, and his neshama covered all 600,000 Jews, he could then see clearly these 600,000 letters of the Torah. Again, this was said before Rabbi Arizal got to Yisrael. So imagine then again what Rabbi Arizal was like afterwards. How much deeper he understood and knew the letters of the Torah, which of course are the words of the Torah, are the words of Hashem. They are infinite in depth, and no one has ever yet been able to fathom the complete depth of the Torah. So Hashem HaKadosh is no one has ever made a dent in the Torah yet. Torah is Hashem Tamimo Meshivas Nefesh. Torah, after all the millions of Mefarshim, is still solid. The surface has not been dented yet. even the greatest tzadik has not got beneath the surface. There is that much more to learn. This gives us a little idea of the greatness of the Arizal. We should be zecher, be emes, to be truly niskaret to the Arizal, the emunah shleima, the tachlis, and the zechus, our emunah, the emes, the tmimus, and Arizal. Now, we should be zecher to remain niskaret, netzach, forever in Elam Habo, after the coming of Mashiach, Chiyas HaMesim, Gan Eden, and the Yosef Lovai. It's chus for this emunah now. We should be zecher to see with our eyes the Biyas Mashiach Nikenu, Binyan Beis Hamikdash Heidach. Amen. 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 Continue to share in Sichai Saran, Seif Kuf Ayin Zayin, paragraph 177. Mesazal tells Benazal's Sichar, Benazal's words to one of his Talmidim. Benazal encouraged very strongly this Talmud. Of course, it was reported to posterity. These words were reported then and recorded by the Mesazal in the Sichai Saran. Mesazal's words encouraging the Talmud and encouraging all future Talmidim to be always besimcha. Always besimcha, despite the difficulties, despite the weather, despite any setbacks. Always be besimcha. Menachem said it is only fitting to be besimcha, to be happy about what? Be happy with Hashem. Now, of course, a person could say, who understands the greatness of Hashem? Who can understand Hashem? To be happy with Hashem. Menachem said, trust me, because I understand Hashem to a great enough degree, and therefore, trusting that Arizal can be very happy with Hashem. In addition, Arizal said to this Talmud, to his Talmidim, it is also very fitting for you to be happy with me, or about me. To be overjoyed, elated that you were zecher to have a Rebbe like myself. This Arizal said to this Talmud. And it's something that we have to think very deeply about, take very much to heart. Because Arizal said it to a Talmud, to his Talmud. A Talmud means not one who saw Arizal then, but one who is a Talmud of Arizal, even today, or in future generations. So anybody today who feels that he is close to Arizal, that he is a Talmud of Arizal, should be overjoyed that we are zecher, let's hope that we are all included, that we are zecher to have Arizal for our Rebbe. Arizal said this is something to be very happy about. It means that this should be uppermost, the greatest, or one of the greatest items of simcha in the heart and mind of a Jew who is zecher to that. This we must take to heart every day. If ever a person, chas v'shalom, feels depressed, ever, chas v'shalom, he has some kind of atzvus or worry, and he wants to get out of this depressed feeling, stop and think for a second. Arizal is my Rebbe, and that should send a thrill of joy, a joyous feeling coursing through every one of his veins and arteries, his mind and heart. Arizal is my Rebbe. I am a Talmud of Arizal. Therefore, again, we say that if a person is not besimcha, there is something missing. He cannot really claim to be a Talmud of Arizal. He cannot really be a Breslover. He can't, because if a person is truly a Breslover, he should be filled with simcha always. Just that thought alone. I'm lucky with Breslover. Same simcha as a person should say, how fortunate that I was created a Jew. Shloya Sani Goy. Through a miracle, through an act of Hashem, through Hashem's will, I was created a Jew, rather than Chas V'Shalom being created a Goy. Or, a person could have been created for all purposes. He could have been walking around as a horse. There might be going a horse, not for the act of kindness of heaven. It might be an animal. See these animals walking the streets? 2-footed animals, 4-footed animals, or 6-footed insects. I don't know, you might be crawling under a kitchen sink. And then, through this miracle, we created human, not only human, but a Jew. That's something to be very happy about. Also, not only that, but the fact that we are fortunate enough to be a Talmud Arizal. So it is certainly an absolute crime on the part of any person to ever be atzvus. There's no bigger crime than that. Therefore, the Arizal calls that the poisonous bite of the original serpent. The bite of the serpent is, the nachash is atzvus, sadness. This Arizal said to, this Talmud Arizal said too, that sometimes a person finds it difficult to be happy, to get into a happy frame of mind. He said, do something even that is not a davar shebekdusha, something that's holy. You want a happy frame of mind. Wow, I just learned the Teshuva. I'm going to sit down and learn the Black Gemara. Some people don't find too much to be happy about because they'd rather be outside playing ball. So in that case, then think of your favorite team winning a game. Let that bring you into simcha. You're in simcha, and then sit down and learn the Black Gemara. That should lead you into the simcha of ruchnius. But no matter what it is, do something to get into simcha. Even if it's something physical, something gashmius, not davar shebekdusha, davar chol. The ikar is, the tachlis is to get into simcha. And this fits in with those words. It is to get into a mitzvah, you can do anything. This is called a mitzvah gedolah. It's a very great mitzvah to be the simcha, tamid, always be the simcha. Rosenfeld says that one time Arizal was standing towards evening, towards dusk. It was getting dark. He was looking out of the window, and very nostalgically, very sadly, Arizal said, look at the time, how quickly time passes. It's not just the day is coming to an end, but this is how a person's life goes. Life is ebbing, life is leaving, and there's so much to do in this world. Look at how fast time is going away, time is escaping. How fleeting time is. You must grasp quickly time before it gets away from you, because time is life. A person has so much to accomplish. Don't let life get away from you. Accomplish it. For Rabbi Arizal's Astalkus, Rabbi Arizal said, just very close to his passing, Rabbi Arizal said that he's already reached a madrega, a level that is so high it's impossible to go any higher while cloaked, while imprisoned in the physical body. Because a person has a certain limit, the greatest person has a limit to how high he can reach in the physical body. Like Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Ki lo yirani hodam v'choy. No person can see me, Hashem said, while he is alive. After he passes away, he can't see me. What is meant by that? There's a certain level that a person can reach in the heavenly world, so tzadik can go just so high while he's alive. After his astalkus, he can rise. In spirit, he can rise much higher. Aharon said that he has reached the madrega where it's impossible to go any higher in the physical form. And therefore, Aharon said, I yearn very much to strip myself of this body, to release the neshama, my soul, that it can rocket upwards to reach the greater heights that are possible without being encumbered by the physical being. And I must do it because I cannot stand. It's impossible to remain stat in one madrega. I cannot remain status quo. I must keep moving up, and therefore it is imperative that my soul leaves the body. I must be nostalgic. This was just before the Arizal Steltus. He knew to reach that point. Gemara says some people reach a point where they've got to leave the world at a young age. They've covered their whole lifetime possibility, and at a youthful age they must leave. Arizal, his time, at the time he was 38 and a half years old, he'd reached the point of impossibility to go any further, higher physically. Next paragraph refers to a Torah in Tikuney Zohar. Tikuney Zohar, chapter Peiches, 88, second volume of the Tikuney Zohar. Menachem said to the messenger once, "Today there appeared to me an angel, a new angel." Of course, to a tzadik, it's nothing new that angels come to a tzadik. It never appears before tzaddikim, especially the tzaddikimis. This time Menachem said, "I saw a new angel now, and I even know his name." And this angel has a number of subordinates who serve him, and each one carries a shofar in his hand, and they blow shofar. They blow tekiah, it's one long, chavruta, 9 short, and tekiah. This is called tarat. Tekiah shofar, we call this tarat. Tekiah, chavruta, tekiah is called tarat. This is what they blow, and they continue to dig. They dig and they search for avedas. Avedas means lost items. They search for lost items. This will explain more in the Tikuney Zohar. Aharon says that the digging for lost items refers to this sound of the shofar. Tarat is Lashon Tevis, posek until Ta'avas Rishoyim Teved. The Tevis, evil desires of Rishoyim, bring about to Avedis. Which means that even the Rishoyim themselves, because of the evil Tevis, they become lost. They go lost. What happens to them? They get lost. We'll see where they go when they get lost. Or they lose treasures. Because of the Taivas, treasures are lost. Spiritual treasures. It is these items, these treasures, these lost spiritual items that these malachim dig for, they blow shofar for, and there's a great simcha when they find these lost articles, these avedas. Avedas, lost articles. When malachim find these lost articles, there's a big simcha that erupts, and they're overjoyed in having found these avedas, which come about through the taivas of the shon. Now, the Menachem says, to elaborate in the Tikuney Zohar, that there is a din, a halacha, in the Torah. You're not allowed to cut down a tree that bears fruit. A fruit-bearing tree is alive. It's productive. You're not allowed to cut down a fruit-bearing tree because a tree is like a human being. It bears fruit, it's living. You're going to cut off something which is producing life. That's, in a sense, like killing. You're destroying a living thing. By the same token, Din says too, separate Din, you're not allowed to pull off leaves from a branch just to destroy. Of course, on Shabbos, that's a major malacha. Even during the week, there are people who walk by bushes and pull off leaves from these bushes, or break branches off. It's a matter of indifference to it. Subconsciously, they don't concentrate on it. They don't realize that they are destroying something which is alive. These are leaves which are alive. Not only that, but these leaves live with a purpose. They actually serve Hashem. Every blade of grass, every leaf on a bush, every leaf on a tree davens to Hashem constantly. It's a regular tefillah that goes to Hashem from these living things. The person is destroying them unless there is a purpose. The purpose is to prune the tree or the bushes, to make them grow better. You cut them. However, just to destroy is a sin. And it says the same thing too. There is an isur, it is a sin, but also more so, it's very dangerous. For a person to eat a fruit of a tree that is not ripe, a fruit that is not yet ripe, it is a sin to eat, because when it is not yet ripe, the fruit was taken off a tree before it was ripe, that fruit is still growing. That fruit is still receiving nourishment. It is actually breathing. The fruit breathes life from the tree to which it is attached. So when you pull a fruit off a tree, when it is not yet ripe, not ready to be taken off, and literally this fruit is still gasping for breath. Gasping, it's dying, seeking the breath that it needs for life. When it is ripe, it requires no more life to it. It's ready to be eaten. That's the nature of the purpose of the fruit. When it's not yet ripe, this fruit needs life to sustain it, to make it grow, to reach its peak. So when it's pulled off a tree, when it's not ripe, the fruit actually gasps for breath of life. Then it says, now, no. You should know this as fact, that when a person eats from this fruit, that fruit that is gasping for breath and life will actually draw its life from the person who is eating it. So a person is putting his own life in danger. Imagine that this fruit becomes a man-eating plant. Eating a non-ripened fruit is that dangerous to a person because this fruit keeps drawing. It has a magnetic pull, a tremendous power that pulls life for itself, so it can pull its life from the person who is eating it. That's how dangerous it is to eat a fruit that is not fully ripened. What should a person do? A person pulls a unripened fruit from a tree, let it lie, either lie in the sun until it becomes ready, or let it stay for a while until actually this gasping comes to an end. When the fruit actually dies, the need for life comes to an end, and then it could be eaten. Or there can be a way to eat a fruit that is not ripe yet, a fruit that is actually still alive. If a person says a bracha over that fruit with such a tremendous kavanah that he is able to be misaken, to perfect the fruit with the bracha alone. Whatever the fruit could have gotten from the tree, the fruit receives now from this bracha. The person must be an actual tzadik, be able to say a bracha with such intentions, knowledge of how to say it, and how to perfect the life of this fruit, misaken this fruit with the bracha. In addition, a tzaddik could draw from this fruit actual treasures. The fruit itself has treasures in it. It has this partial life, and a tzaddik, by eating this fruit, can actually draw from this fruit life and these avedas. Where do these avedas go to? They go into these fruit, they become embedded in them. The tzaddik can draw out this life of the fruit and these avedas. these lost articles. These lost articles that are actually souls. The good part of the soul of a Rosha, or lost souls, will go into these fruit and require a tikkun, perfection, and this the tzadik can do. Of course, we understand this must take a very great tzadik, because usually any person who's not an Amoritz, who's good, when he eats meat, why is a human being, a Jew, allowed to eat meat? After all, meat is alive, an animal is something which is alive. What gives a human the right to take another's life, even though it's only an animal? How is a human allowed to kill an animal, take its life, eat its meat? The answer is because the human is doing the animal a favor. By eating the meat of the animal becomes absorbed into the human body. Anything you eat, digest, becomes absorbed as part of the body. So you're raising, you're elevating this animal into a human. It becomes part of a human now instead of an animal. By doing the animal that favor, you're not hurting the animal, you are improving its lot. You're benefiting it. Here, there are 4 levels of creation. The top level is human, the next level is animal, the third level is vegetation, fourth level is earth, inanimate. Vegetation is 2 levels below a human being. A tzaddik is able to raise vegetation or fruit 2 levels below to the level of human. So great a step does this fruit of vegetation take. The tzaddik does this by elevating the life of this fruit, plus the lost neshamas that are found in it. These are the avedas we spoke about, that the tzaddik finds. By the way, the man says that it does not help for a fruit that is not ripe, it does not help to cook that fruit. By cooking it, you're not going to kill it. You will not destroy this living vampire, this living monster that can take this man-eating plant, a fruit. You must wait until the fruit ceases to draw life. Now, go back to this point. The Rebbeinu says in that Torah, know that there is a malach. This is what the Rebbeinu are referred to here in his words of Nosson. There is a malach, an angel who is appointed over others, and they all carry shofars. They blow the tarat, tkiya through a tkiya, which refers to the lost articles of the Rishonim, Tavas Rishon Teved. In fact, there are even a case where Tzadik 2 loses. Tzadik 2 can lose at times. Yesh Tzadik Eved. It's a case where Tzadik 2 loses B'tzidkai. However, the loss of the Tzadik is temporary, and he does something which lowers himself. He lost a notch in his level, but when the Tzadik does Teshuva, he returns, he corrects his second step, then, in turn, he finds, by doing tshuva, he goes to a much higher level than before. He now finds these avedas, these lost articles, and there is a very great simcha that ensues. Now, in that Torah, Nosson at the end says that Torah is combined with previous Torahs. They actually are all one. Arizal begins first with the Torah that speaks about the Sod Kavanas Elul. The month of Elul has a special segula. What is the month of Elul? A special month that pertains to Teshuva. A person does Teshuva. The month of Elul, we find, especially the Arizal says there, the Elul is Teshuva for Chas v'Shalom Pegam Abris. Pegam Abris means where there is Rachmana litzlan Zerel of Atola. This Zerel of Atola, it's Pegam Abris, that means a lost article. Because this is life that is lost, potential life that is lost. These are Avedas. Thinking about these Avedas, Elul is a segula to correct these lost articles. And it's followed immediately by Rosh Hashanah, which is the blowing of the shofar. On Rosh Hashanah, the blowing of the shofar completes the item of Teshuva. Then there is the simcha. The posek says Rosh Hashanah person should be the simcha Be b'simcha because you must have bitachon and faith that on Rosh Hashanah with true tshuva, if you've gone through for Elul, and Rosh Hashanah you're inscribed and sealed in the book of life. If, of course, you are wise enough to be attached to the tzadik emes, tzadikim who are sealed on Rosh Hashanah in the Sefer Chaim. So those Teidas, speaking about Elul, Rosh Hashanah, Tkiyas, are actually one with this, and with a statement about the fruit where these Avedas are found, and they search for these Avedas by this Malach, and then with his assistance, his aids, all referring to the Tzadik Emes, who seeks and finds these Avedas, and what a simcha it is when a lost soul, for whom there is no hope at all, through his own efforts, suddenly the tzaddik finds his soul, seeks him out, finds him, and elevates his soul, and brings his soul back as masak in that soul. The simcha through tarat, the keys that are blown in. Zaydik Kodesh says that the tzaddik emes, of course, is Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is the tzaddik emes whose begimatria, the names of Hashem, Kael Shakai. Kael Shakai refers to these tefillas. Kael is Chesed, Shakai is Yesod. Zayampin covers the 6 tefillas from Chesed to Yesod. Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the Vav, covers these 6 tefillas, therefore he is called Kael Shakai, which means the tzaddik emes, carries the name of Hashem. Now, Kael Shakai, when the tzaddik emes is complete. When is the tzaddik emes complete? Not when he sits by himself and does mitzvahs, but when he goes out, as Moshe Rabbeinu did, to search for the Eid of Rav, to search for the lost souls, to bring them in, that tzaddik has fulfilled his mission. He is complete. He is molei. The milui of Kael Shakai is begimatria tarat. Blowing at his shofar tarat signifies a simcha. The tzaddik has become fulfilled because he has found these neshamas, these avedas. He was masaking them and brought them back. Again, of course, this shows, imagine how a person should never give up hope. A person feels lost. Do not be depressed because there is someone searching for you. Arizal said that one of the main tefillos of his Vedidus, a young child once asked Rabbi Arizal, what should I say in his Vedidus? What is the best words I can say? Rabbi Arizal said to him, the last posek in Tehillim, long chapter Kuf Yotes. The posek is Ta'isi Kiseh Eved Bakesh Avdecha Kim Tesecha Leshachachti. Hashem, I have wandered from you, just as a sheep wanders from the flock and gets lost. Ta'isi, I've wandered, I've gotten lost. Kiseh Eved, like a lamb that is lost. But Bakesh Avdecha, seek me, search for me. I have not forgotten your call. If the lamb recalls, remembers the sound of the shepherd's voice, be brought back by the shepherd's voice. Hashem, I have not forgotten your call. Call the words of the Torah, the words of the tzaddik emes. So when a person feels that he is lost, he still should not be depressed. Know that we still have that chevel v'kedusha, that rope tied around us, which the tzaddik emes holds on to. We are not being forsaken. At no time are we abandoned, even if we are lost. The search is never given up for. The tzaddik emes continues to dig, to search, to ferret out those lost neshamas. So there is always hope. Just not to forget the koil, the voice of Kedusha, the voice of the tzadik emes, the words of the tzadik emes. This is the greatest ischaskus possible. We see why this is tied together with the former statement of Arizal to always be the simcha. Arizal said, I know of certain chachmas. Chachmas means items of wisdom. Wisdom is something that ordinary people are not aware of, something that is very deep. And when a person hears something that is deep, wisdom, called a chiddush, for example, something new, then there is a feeling of satisfaction, of gladness. Because he feels that something missing now has been returned to him. There's a joyous feeling when a person learns a blat Gemara, and he gets to a tesis kasha, and then that kasha is answered, he feels fulfilled. Something very happy about that. So this is called chachmais hatayra, wisdom of Torah. There are also times when a person has other types of wisdom. A person learns things that are new. He learns mathematical tricks, or he learns other types of wisdom like music. He enjoys a new knowledge, a new type of knowledge from which he can benefit. Or astrology, stars, study of the stars. Any kind of chachma that could satisfy, satiate a person. So it is possible, very logical and possible, that a person might be very hungry at the time. He's ready to go for his lunch or his supper. He's listening to a chiddush. He forgets about the fact that he's hungry. Some people, of course, it's very difficult to do that. But for many or most, a person could actually forget, stop feeling the pangs of hunger, and just listen enthralled to an interesting story, fascinating story that makes him forget his hunger, or a chiddush, something new, a chachma which he did not know before. Arizal said, I know chachmas, that if I would begin to reveal to people these chachmas, a little of them, then it is possible that the pleasure of achieving the knowledge of these chachmas would be so great that people can actually live without food or drink. Literally get along without food or drink. They can sustain themselves on the chachmas. Now, this we can understand temporarily. The person's feelings, pangs of hunger. But how do you feed the body? The body must receive nourishment. The bloodstream, different parts of the body require being fed. A person fasts for a period of time, he could die. He needs nourishment. And yet, it is possible, there are such types of wisdom that are so rich that they can actually serve a physical purpose too. This is difficult for us to conceive because we don't have that kind of wisdom. And also there is such a chachma that is so wealthy in itself that it expands from the semi-spiritual, mental, to the physical. A person can live on this wisdom alone. He can be lost on a desert island without any trace of food, or in the desert, and sustain himself with this wisdom alone. It's difficult for us to conceive of such a thing, but of course it's simple to understand that the tzadik emes has much greater powers than this. If you translate the wisdom into something that is physically nourishing, this power he possesses. Not only that, we'll even go further, that a person could live through this wisdom, and at times the person can practically die also from this wisdom, because it is possible for a person to hear something that is so pleasant, like one hearing a special type of music that is very eerie, that is ethereal, a heavenly type of music, where a person would just dissipate from pleasure. Or he can become so ecstatic from this pleasure that his soul could actually leave him. A person can die from ecstasy. Thrill and ecstasy can actually kill a person. So, Rabbi Nachman said this wisdom is so great that a person might actually die of ecstasy, because his soul would yearn to leave him, to merge with this great power of wisdom revealed to him. The days of the Arizal was no different than in former generations. At all times, the arch enemy of the tzadik emes was the Satan himself. The Gemara says too, the Satan himself will forego his attacks against the entire Jewish nation. It's his pleasure to make Jews commit sins. Let them all go, and he'll attack the Talmidei Chachamim, learned scholars. More so, he's willing to let them all go just to get at the tzadik emes. He just win against the tzadik emes, that's all he wants. Victory against his arch enemy. So, in all generations we find that the difficulty that tzadik emes had, where the Satan tried to bring about enmity against the tzadik emes through other tzaddikim. At the time of Avraham Avinu, the whole world was against him. He accused Avraham Avinu of being an apikatus, exact opposite of the truth. Even Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the greatest leader, the shepherd, the true, trusty shepherd, most loyal ever to Hashem, still, many battles that he go through in his lifetime, there were so many enemies that rose up against him. So the Satan injected poison into their minds against Moshe Rabbeinu. They suspected Moshe Rabbeinu of the lowest type of crimes possible, and there were so much friction among the Jews against Moshe Rabbeinu. Or the brothers of Yosef HaTzadik were all tzaddikim, and they sold their own brother to slavery, their brother who was the tzaddik emes. Or Shaul HaMelech, who was the tzaddik, too, complete tzaddik, and still he attacked David HaMelech. This is all done by the venom injected through the Satan himself. In all generations this held true. We find that the time of Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem HaKodesh, the leading rabbis at that time, the posek rabbis, banded together to ostracize, to put in chayil in the Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem HaKodesh. One of this line, how could they, very famous names of Shulchan Aruch, how could they have fallen into such a misconception of the truth? To think that the Baal Shem Tov was against the principles they stood for, against religious principles, chas v'shalom. But this is how much the Satan worked against the tzaddik emes. So too in the time of Rabbi Nachman, we have the main battle against Rabbi Nachman at that time. This was carried on later against Rav Nosson. 5 years of suffering, of torture Rav Nosson went through by the Chelkim and the Misnagdim. But to this day, there are still bubbling under the surface, and sometimes it surfaces, the enmity, the hostility against Rabbi Nachman's Talmidim, Rabbi Nachman's teachings. Rabbi Nachman once spoke about this, about these misnagdim, the Chelkim against him, many at that time. Rabbi Nachman explained to his Talmidim, the fact is that these misnagdim, these Chelkim, are not really opposed to me. They do not really hate me. They do not consider me as their enemy. What then? They have conjured up in their minds a certain figure. And this figure, with many faults, is the one they're against. Now they have mistaken me for that figure, that person. It's a mistake in identity. Identified me with another type of individual, and therefore they are chalik and misnagid against me. Now this happens many times. It's possible for people to make that mistake, that type of error, and this is why one person can suddenly begin to feel enmity to his best friend sometimes, because he imagines in his mind that there are things being done wrong which really don't exist. That way he inflames a hatred that is unwarranted. Here, the Menachem said they have created a figure, and this figure is filled with faults. They are out to destroy this figure, and they've placed me in that position. They imagine me being that figure, but it's not me personally they're against. They're against that certain type of figure that they've created in their minds. This is called also the Nosson says, this is the Elam HaTmudes, where a world of fantasy where things are switched around. It seems to be switched, but it really isn't. It's only fantasy. For example, we have in Tikuney Zohar story Rabbi Nachman tells of the two infants that were born, the prince born to the queen, and a slave born to the maid. And then one of the nurses switched these two children. The slave was brought up as the prince, and the prince was brought up as a slave. During the years, eventually, it's a long story, and it's put in my series, anyone can read it there. Eventually, this was found out that it had to come to the surface because the attributes of royalty are inborn. So the prince showed his true colors eventually, and the slave showed that he was a slave. The truth came out. But at the time, during the beginning, initial time, people gave their respect to the slave as though he were a king, a prince, and the prince was treated very rudely as though he were a slave. Rosenfeld says this is the Elam HaTmudes. What was the action of the people in reference to these two individuals? They called a slave prince, and they called the prince slave. Was the real prince now a slave? Was the real slave now a prince? Of course not. It's impossible to change their identity. Identity is one that is permanent. The prince permanently remained a prince, and the slave remained a slave. What was changed only was the name. They now named the prince slave and named the slave prince. So it was only by name alone that the error came about. Because of that name, meaning they imagined, they named the slave prince, they thought that he was a prince. Because of this false name, they imagined he was the prince, and they gave him the honors that did not belong to him. But this is only because they imagined this, so it was a vision conjured up by them, but a mistaken identity. Exactly this, the Rosenfeld says, the case here too, where they imagine that the tzadik emes is one who does wrong, is one who is fit to be chalik against, and that's why in all generations, when we had these machlekes, when they were so opposed to fire a position against the Baal Shem Kodesh, they wanted to put him in chayim because they thought Baal Shem Kodesh was someone else. Had they known who he really was, this could never have happened. Even the worst misnagdim, the worst chalkim, do so because they imagine that the person they're chalik against is someone else. But in actuality, they could never change this fact. This Rabbi Nachman said, is chalkim against me are making an error. It is their mistake, In their minds, they've created a vision, an illusion of someone who is bad, and they've placed me, my figure, into that form that they've created. That's why they are chelik against me. And of course, this cannot ever be really switched. There's no way to switch the true identity of a person. The tzadik emes remains a tzadik emes, and no matter what these misnagdim will say about him, his kedusha remains forever. Same as Kaviyachal, when you have the Kaifirim, the atheists who speak against the existence of Hashem, Chas v'Shalom, they will be destroyed eventually. The kavod of Hashem is never dented, Chas v'Shalom. The kavod of Hashem remains always unblemished. So too the kavod of the tzadik emes, in truth, remains solid. None of these Rishonim or Chok and Misnagdim can do harm to the honor of the tzadik emes. It's only a light that is temporarily hidden. Mashiach comes, eventually light will come forth, and all will recognize it. Ashrei to those who don't wait for Mashiach's coming to recognize the light of the tzaddik. Those who don't wait till after passing and find out the truth in Olam Haba will get this during their lifetime. Ashrei to those who have this amunah of the emes and the tzaddik emes. Ashrei that we are zechet to be classified as Breslov, as followers of the tzaddik emes. We should be zechet throughout our entire lifetime to continue to remain solidly entrenched in this amunah shlema and to have this lanetzach forever. And that's a chus we should be zechet to see the coming of Shir Tikuney. Amen.